Which is more powerful, quality or quantity? And which takes precedence, matter or form? As we go into the month of Elul, where we focus so much on davening, we're going to use a siyum of Masechta Rosh Hashanah, speaking about the power of davening, to explain the difference and the value of each of these realities, quality and quantity, matter and form. With regards to davening with a minyan, which is one of the most important factors of davening, we discovered that there's a debate between the Chachamim and Rabbi Gamliel. The Chachamim say, just like the Shliach Tzibur is required to daven, over here davening referring primarily to Shemona Esrei, likewise, each individual is also required to daven. In other words, so the Chachamim are saying every individual within the community has a personal requirement to daven. Whereas Rabbi Gamliel says the Shliach Tzibur, the Chazan, can include everybody in his davening, and you don't have a personal requirement to daven. That's the Mishnah, the Gemara. So the Gemara then quotes a brayso that says the Chachamim said to Rabbi Gamliel, Dvarecha, according to your view that the Shliach Tzibur covers everybody with his prayers, in that case, Lama Tzibur Mispalin. Why, in fact, do the community daven the Shemona Esrei privately? So Amalahem, he says it's practical to help the Shliach Tzibur, that the Shliach Tzibur should have the opportunity to put his davening together, to prepare his davening. Give him the time while they're davening quietly, that he could prepare the davening he's going to say. Remember, there were no printed sidurim in those days. So Amalahem Rabbi Gamliel, then Rabbi Gamliel retorts, according to you, you say that the obligation to daven is an individual obligation for every person, so why do you need a Shliach Tzibur at all? That's it, because there might be people in the community who are not so familiar with the davening. Again, there's no printed siddur, so you need a Shliach Tzibur to cover those people who don't know how to formulate their own prayers. To which Rabbi Gamliel says, in the same way as you acknowledge that the Shliach Tzibur has the capacity to include in his davening those who are not so familiar with davening, I believe that the Shliach Tzibur could also include the person who does know how to daven. So what is the basis of that debate? Koloimar means to say, according to the Chachamim, the main part of davening is the community. In other words, the definition of davening with a minyan is the fact that many people daven in the same place at the same time. The only reason you have Chazar Sashatz is for practical reasons. In case there's somebody in the crowd who doesn't really know how to daven, the Chazan will be their safety net. Whereas Rabbi Gamliel understands the concept of davening with the minyan completely differently. The most important thing of the minyan is that it has a leader. In other words, the repetition of the shat is the main factor of davening with a minyan. And the fact that then, over and above that, the community davens their own private Shemona Esrei beforehand, that's just practical to assist the Shliach Tzibur, so he could prepare his repetition that he's going to daven. Okay, so Chachamim say the main thing is the community, and Rabbi Gamliel says the main thing is the representative of the community. So let's understand what lies behind this debate. The debate between Rabbi Gamliel and the Chachamim, if you focus on the community of the Shliach Tzibur, is based on a more broad debate, which is what takes precedence? The quantity of many individuals, beings, behaviors, actions, or the quality of one spectacular person or action. This, as we're going to see, is a running debate between Rabbi Gamliel and his colleagues. And the most stark example of this is the Gemara tells us in Brochus that when Rabbi Gamliel was the head of the yeshiva, the head of the Sanhedrin, he made a public announcement called Talmud She'ein Toiche Kebaroi. Any Talmud who is not internally as solid spiritually as he appears externally, should not come into the yeshiva. The very famous story where they removed Rabbi Gamliel from that position at some point. When Rabbi Gamliel was displaced and replaced by Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. So one of the first things they did was they removed the bouncer at the door of the yeshiva, and they opened up for all students to attend the yeshiva. And they had to add a whole lot of extra benches into the yeshiva because now there was an influx of students that Rabbi Gamliel would not have accepted. That tells you about Rabbi Gamliel's perspective on life. Rabbi Gamliel's view is that what creates the value of a yeshiva is the quality of the students who are there. That's why he only wanted to include in this yeshiva environment the ultimate students who are internally as good as they are externally, knowing that that's going to reduce the amount of students. Whereas his colleagues, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Akiva, who they believe that it's better to have an abundance of people, and that overrides the value of the greatness and specialness of an individual. For which reason they believe that we should allow all kinds of students into the yeshiva, even those who are not so inside like the outside. Because the main thing is, the more students in the yeshiva, the better. The ideal is to have abundance. Knowing that Rabbi Gamliel's concern is real and it will reduce to a certain extent the quality of student in the yeshiva, and if the yeshiva generally drops its quality standard, that's going to affect all of the students, and they knew that, and they still argued that having more students outweighs that eichus quality control. Based on which we can deduce, why is it Rabbi Gamliel is arguing that the chazan is the core of what a minyan is? Because he's following his general approach in halacha, which is the quality of the individual, in this case the shliach tzibur, is more important than the abundance of people who may daven at a much more rudimentary level. Okay, so let's understand the deeper message behind this debate. We're talking about a debate over here between Rabbi Gamliel and the Chachamim about what makes a community, what makes a minyan. So let's understand, what is the value of a minyan? Actually, a minyan has both values. It has numbers and it has quality. Practically, in order to have a minyan, you have to have many Jewish people, a minimum of 10. So therefore, there's an emphasis on quantity. But take 10 or more Jewish people and put them together, and the whole reality changes. It's not an accumulation of 10 individuals anymore, but rather this is now a different status of people, an Eidah Kedosha, a holy congregation. In other words, they all changed, they're all upgraded in quality because of the quantity. With that in mind, we can distinguish between what the value is of a whole group of people davening together as a minyan versus the value of the chazan as an outstanding personality driving the minyan. Putting together a minyan has the value of numbers. There are many, many tefillas all collaborating. Because there are 10 people davening together. So the maila of the crowd is many, many tefillas. You've got this energy of davening. Whereas the person who's chosen to be the shliach tzibur obviously brings a quality to the davening that the crowd doesn't necessarily have. And the reason for that is, first of all, besides the obvious, which is in halacha, if you want to be the shliach tzibur, there's certain prerequisites in order to be the appropriate person to represent the tzibur. So then naturally, if the person is somebody who is chosen where everybody wants them to be the shliach tzibur and they have all these qualities, so it makes logical sense that their davening is at a higher level than the davening of the rest of the community. But besides that, Ari Yosera Mizoy goes beyond that. In Yonei Shel Shliach Tzibur Hu, the concept of a shliach tzibur, it's a fascinating concept, is like we say in our davening, right, in the morning brachas. His mouth becomes the equivalent of everybody else's mouths together. He becomes their representative, so his mouth is like their mouth. In other words, not only is he a special person, but every word of davening that he says, every word of davening the chazan says is as if the entire community was saying that word at that time. Behind it, that implies שבתפילת השעת מרוכזת ומאוחדת תפילוסים של הציבור כפי שנעשה מציאות אחת של עדה קדושה. That means the value of the tzibur, that when they come together, they are transformed into some different entity, which is a holy congregation, is now being channeled and manifest through this person, the Shatz. He is the one speaking like that Eidah Kedosha. Which means that his davening has a quality to it which is greater even than the quality of all the people in the minyan because they're davening together. You know, their davening together transforms him into a new entity, and the Shatz becomes that new entity. Which is why there's a debate between Rabbi Gamliel and Chachamim. Chachamim go with a general trend, which is that quantity outdoes quality. And therefore, when there are a whole lot of people davening together in a tzibur, the main thing is it's a whole lot of people together. Gamliel says that the value of a great individual is even more powerful than the collaboration of the klal. Therefore, yes, the Shliach Tzibur is only one person davening. When he does his Chazaras Hashatz, he's the only person davening. Nevertheless, that one davening is worth more than the davening of everybody together, because it has higher quality. And in Rabbi Gamliel's world, quality trumps quantity. Why does he have a higher quality? Because his davening is the channeling of everybody else's davening. So that's the big debate between Rabbi Gamliel and Chachamim in this scenario, and we'll see that it plays out in other scenarios too. Because, the Rebbe explained elsewhere, if you find that there is a debate between the Chachamim, and it's based on a single approach, but yet the debate appears in two different places or more, it must be that the Gemara will tell us the debate, even though the lines of argument are the same, but it will tell us in different scenarios, because each scenario gives us an insight the other scenario would not have given us. That's why we have to explain and spell out every time they debate. And we cannot just simply deduce, we know what Rabbi Gamliel holds, so therefore it applies in X and Y cases too. To use the language of the Gemara, we also need the other debate. In other words, here we've seen Rabbi Gamliel and the Chachamim debating about davening with regards to whether it's quantity or quality. We're about to see that they have the same debate, well, we've already touched on it, with regards to Torah learning. Why do we need to have the debate along the same lines spelled out in two different areas? Must be because each one gives us perspective that we would not have known just from the other. So far we've quoted two debates between Rabbi Gamliel and the Chachamim about davening, whether it's about the tzibur or the shliach tzibur, about learning whether it's toichei kebaro and therefore less students, or the more students the better. So why do we have to have both of those debates if they're essentially saying the same thing, quality versus quantity? So let's understand. Let's look at the scenario of the Beis Medrash where Rabbi Gamliel's debate is, I don't want to have a student there whose internal reality is not linked or is not synonymous with his external appearance. Now, if you have a student who is showing that they're at a certain level that they're not really at, the truth is they're not a true student. Because we have a Maimon Chazal that says that any student whose internal reality does not reflect their external appearance is actually not a true Talmid Chacham. In other words, there is a lack in the person's status as a Talmid Chacham if they are not internally and externally aligned. Whereas if you're talking about davening, as we said right from the beginning, the nature of a tzibur is not only that it brings more people together, but as we've seen, bring more people together and their status changes. So in other words, the davening is about quality too. So it's about quantity and it's about quality. Because when 10 Jews daven together, each person's davening, even though they're davening alone, but it's now the davening within a community. Yashmael al Pnei Tfilas HaYochid has an advantage over that same person davening on their own. And therefore, the quality that the Shliach Tzibur brings to the picture, that he is the one who is the channel, the union of all the various people in the Tzibur to become their singular voice, you're improving on quality that's already there. Again, in the case of a student whose internal and external don't match, he's not a true Talmid Chacham. He's lacking. In the case of the Shliach Tzibur, he's adding to value that is already there in the Tzibur. That's why, had we only seen that Rabbi Gamliel believes that the quality of student is the key factor in establishing a base medrash, and we had not discussed the position of the Shliach Tzibur in a minyan, then I'd say, okay, I understand why Rabbi Gamliel, in the context of a base medrash, focuses on quality. Because if you don't have quality, you're not a Talmid Chacham. So therefore, you have to follow on quality. But perhaps when it comes to davening, maybe Rabbi Gamliel would agree with the Chachamim that davening together with the crowd is the primary factor. Because it has both values. Because what Rabbi Gamliel is looking for, quality exists, because putting people together to daven elevates the quality of their davening, as well as having the additional value of quantity. Maybe there Rabbi Gamliel would agree with the Chachamim that the community is more important than the Shliach Tzibur. Or because we might misunderstand Rabbi Gamliel's opinion in that case, had we only learned his opinion about the quality of a student in a base medrash. Therefore, the Mishnah and then the Gemara had to spell out for us Rabbi Gamliel's opinion when it comes to davening, to tell us that even in the case of Tfilah B'Tzibur, where the community has a quality advantage, still, Kedai Hamiyut Bekamus, it's still greater to have fewer people, in this case one, the Shliach Tzibur, if that one Shliach Tzibur can add quality that even the community themselves don't have. On the other hand, had the Gemara only told us about Rabbi Gamliel's view in the context of davening, well, then obviously we could misunderstand that maybe when it comes to choosing students for the yeshiva, the Chachamim, even though they normally say quantity is the most important thing, maybe they'd agree in the case of a student, because if you don't have Teicha Gebaru, you're not a Talmid Chacham. But besides that, even Rabbi Gamliel's opinion, if Rabbi Gamliel is of the view that the Shliach Tzibur is more valuable than the Tzibur itself, I don't automatically know that he believes the same thing is true of the kind of student who has to come into a Beis HaMedrash. Why? Because a Beis Medrash is a place you learn. And how do you learn Torah? As the Mishnah tells us famously in Perek Vav Pirkei Avos, Haniknis bedibuk chaverim over pilpul talmidim. Part of the methodology of how you learn Torah is to be connected to other people who are learning Torah and to be able to debate with them. As we know, the Gemara tells us, I learned most from my students. So therefore, you would think even Rabbi Gamliel, who normally believes that quality is the key factor, maybe the quality comes from the quantity. The more students you have in a yeshiva, even if they're not the most ideal students, there'd be more discussion, there'd be more debate, and therefore people would be able to understand and absorb the Torah in a deeper way. So perhaps even Rabbi Gamliel, had we only learned his opinion about quality with regards to Shliach Tzibur, we would not automatically know that he believes the same with regards to Torah learning. And from a more, so to speak, life lessons perspective, you could say, Torah, as its name illustrates, is all about instruction, to instruct and show us the way that we're supposed to follow and how to behave. Then logic says, well, if the Torah is supposed to teach you how to behave, then you can't expect the students to already know how to behave, and surely the students should also accommodate people who have to still learn how to behave. They're going to go to yeshiva in order to find out the way to conduct themselves. And you could say, Rabbi Gamliel would agree that the purpose of the Torah is to get these students to reach the point of Teichen Kebara. Which is why the Gemara could not rely only on the fact that we know that Rabbi Gamliel believes that Eichus, the quality, is the main thing with regards to davening, but how to spell it out also with regards to Torah learning. So we would know without doubt that Rabbi Gamliel believes that quality overrides quantity, both in the context of how you establish davening with a minyan and in the context of how you choose which kind of student should be in the yeshiva. Now, this question/debate, if the key factor is quality or quantity, so this is one and the same as, or at least very similar to, another debate, something that Rogatchover spends a lot of time and attention on, which is Mao Iker Hadavar. When you look at any item, any entity, what is the main component of that entity? Choimer Ugeshem Hadavar is the main thing, its physical material reality, or its form and its theme. In other words, if the main thing about something is its physical presence, then obviously the more you have, the better. So let's say, for example, you have a coin. What's a coin? It's a physical item. If that's the value, that it's a physical item that has a particular physical value, the more coins, the better. Whereas if I'm looking primarily at the form, in other words, the meaning behind this particular item, then the quality of what you do with it is more important than the quantity. In other words, if I see this coin as a means, as a medium for tzedakah, then one coin given to tzedakah is worth much more than a whole lot of coins that are just sitting in a bank. Now that we're linking quality and meaning or form and quantity with materialism and matter, we can see another debate between Rabbi Gamliel and the Chachamim that follows their respective opinions. In the Gemara Shavuos, it tells us, we're talking over here about what is called moed b'miktzah. So moed b'miktzah basically means somebody claims that another person owes them something, and they acknowledge part of the debt. Then the Torah requires the defendant to make an oath that he doesn't actually owe the person what's being claimed from him. So now the Gemara asks, the claimant comes to him and says, you owe me, or you have wheat that belongs to me and I need it back. Well, the guy says it wasn't wheat, it was barley. So it sounds like he's partially acknowledging what is being claimed from him. Says the halacha potter, he does not have to take the oath because he was asking for wheat and he responded with barley. Whereas Rabbi Gamliel says no, even in that scenario, the defendant would have to take an oath that he does not owe the wheat or doesn't own the wheat that the other person has, even though that's what's being claimed from him. I know. What's happening over here? According to the majority view, which is represented by the Tanakama, they say very simply, if a person responds on the same lines of what was claimed from them, but they only respond partially, that's when they have to take an oath. But Rabbi Gamliel's sphere, whereas Rabbi Gamliel holds, even if what the person acknowledges is not exactly along the same lines as what was claimed from him, still has to take an oath because he's acknowledged at least something. That debate goes back to the same question we've asked. What is the main thing about an entity? The matter, i.e. the quantity of it, or the meaning, and therefore the quality of it. Let's understand that over hakta. In order to understand it, let's first look at this. Why is it that the rule about moed b'miktzah, that means if I acknowledge half of the claim against me, or part of the claim against me, I have to take an oath to defend my position, and that has to be along the same lines as what is being claimed is, because think about it logically, if I'm responding to something that's not what you claimed from me, then I'm not acknowledging any of what you claimed. The person said, you have wheat of mine. He never said a word about wheat. And with regards to wheat, he's completely rejecting the claim against him. And the fact that he's acknowledging that he has barley that belongs to the other guy, the other guy never mentioned that, so he's not responding to his claim. Moed b'miktzah is you responding to the claim with part of the claim. Therefore, it does not fall into the category of moed b'miktzah. Doesn't fall into this category of somebody who's partially acknowledging the claim against him. So therefore, the The argument must boil down to, so what is the core of a claim? Because when a person is claiming money from somebody else, there are two factors. Practically, you have to state what the claim is. Are you claiming wheat? Are you claiming barley? You have to spell out what it is that you're asking for. That is the matter at stake, the matter in question over here. Is it X or is it Y? And the so-called form, the quality of the claim is how much? It doesn't matter what you're asking. So you could be saying, you owe me 100 gold coins, 100 pieces of wheat. Therein lies the debate between the Chachamim and Rabbi Gamliel, following their approach to halacha. As we know, Chachamim focus on the quantity, which is therefore a focus on the matter. So therefore they think, whatever you're analyzing, you have to look at the stuff. So in our case, let's look at the stuff that is in question. The stuff he demanded of him was wheat. And his response was, I only have barley of yours. And they're not talking about the same stuff. So therefore he hasn't acknowledged even a part of what was claimed from him. Whereas Gamliel says, no, you've got to look at the quality, the core, the parameters of what's being debated over here. If a person's saying you have something of mine, the fact that you have something of mine remains true, whether it be wheat or barley. So therefore he's saying, you have something of mine, it's called wheat. And he says, no, I have something of yours, it's called barley. But you said you have something of yours. You said the same theme. You spoke to the eichos, to the quality, to the message of what's being debated over here. Therefore it's moed b'miktzas. Even though you're not talking about the same material. That's quite an insight. And as mentioned, if a machlokas is repeated in a different place when it's along the same argumentative lines, so we have to understand why it is. So what's the chiddush over here? So the common denominator between the example of the shliach tzibur, which is davening, and the quality of student in the Beis HaMedrash is that these are both spiritual things associated with a mitzvah. Vim Kain, if you're talking about mitzvahs, so you have Shalom Shatam, that Rabbi Gamliel Ha'ichus Machir B'hem Hu Me'Hai Time Gufa. Then it would make sense why Rabbi Gamliel is focused on the quality, because Shekevin Shezeh Chefta Shel Mitzvah V'Dava Shebigdusha, because we're discussing their things which are all about the quality. They're spiritual things. They're holy things. You think, okay, that's where Rabbi Gamliel says, so look at the quality. You're talking about mitzvahs, you're talking about holiness, you're talking about intangibles. Therefore, you should look at the quality, and that should determine. Wheat, barley, that kind of thing, which is not tethered to a particular mitzvah and is not assigned a degree of holiness, that doesn't have the same value. Like Rashi says in Gemara Beitza, with regards to Su'ud Aschol, where it's talking over there about whether you can use something, an egg that was laid when it was, so to speak, Shabbos was preparing it, so to speak, to be laid. So the concept of azmana basically means this, that if an egg is laid on the first day of Yom Tov and the preceding day was Shabbos, you're not allowed to eat that egg because Shabbos was preparing for Yom Tov. But if it was a regular Sunday, you would be allowed to eat the egg. Why? Because Sudas Chol, a regular meal, is of no consequence, and therefore there's no concept of preparing a day in advance for that meal. Because there it is a meal that you're not mandated by the Torah to eat, it's just your personal choice to eat. Doesn't have the same gravitas, it doesn't have the same value as if it were a meal associated with a Yom Tov or with a Shabbos. So therefore, you think Rabbi Gamliel will have the same kind of shita. If you're talking about Torah, you're talking about davening, that is something where you have to take quality, eichos, into consideration because you're talking about things which are of quality. But if you're just talking about a complaint, you owe me money, I don't owe you money, that's ordinary stuff. It doesn't have the same eichus factor. Were it not for the fact that the Gemara spells out Rabbi Gamliel's view, or the Mishnah at least, that Rabbi Gamliel believes that in the case where a person claims wheat and the other person responds with barley, that he is considered moed b'miktzas, I wouldn't know what Rabbi Gamliel holds in that case just by extrapolating out of davening and out of Torah learning, because those are what appear to be completely different scenarios. That is spiritual stuff, this is ordinary stuff. And likewise, in reverse. Had we only seen the debate between Rabbi Gamliel and the Chachamim with regards to physical or financial claims against a person, I wouldn't know what the Chachamim believe about more spiritual things, because you'd say, well, the reason they focus on quantity in the case of a financial claim is because it's a financial claim, because it's a physical thing, and then physical things, you look at the quantity. Therefore, in each of these cases, we have to spell out the opinions of Rabbi Gamliel and the Chachamim, because we couldn't naturally extrapolate one from the other. So we've discussed so far davening, we've discussed so far Torah, we've left out one of the key components that the world stands on. We've now seen the different views of Rabbi Gamliel and the Chachamim, quality versus quantity, with regards to Torah and to davening. We're going to see a similar thing about how they understand the nature of Gemilas Chesed, of tzedakah, of goodness, of charity. And this is, interestingly enough, going to be a debate about how we are to understand the charity of the nations of the world. Nechleku b'Gemara b'Pirush HaPasuk, so there's the three-way debate in the Gemara about the pasuk that says v'chesed li'umim chatos, that the kindness of the nations of the world is chatos, either sin or lacking, as we shall see. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, it means v'chesed li'umim chatos means kol tzedakah v'chesed shumas akum oisin chetu lohen. So Rabbi Eliezer says any time that the non-Jewish world does tzedakah and chesed, it's a chet. Because the only reason they're doing it is investing in themselves or their empires, that they should grow greater. In other words, ulterior motives. Rabbi Yeshua says it's a chet. Why? And it's a different kind of ulterior motive. They're only doing it to ensure the sustainability of their empire. Rabbi Gamliel says it's a chet. Why? The only reason they give tzedakah is in order that they should be able to boast about the tzedakah that they had given. Now, they sound very, very similar. To make yourself great or to boast about sounds very similar. So the Maharsha explains the difference. He says the meaning of the word lihiskadol is not to make themselves great and fancy and honorable in society. Rather, it means that they, as individuals, they want to give tzedakah in order to prolong their lives. If that's true, according to the Maharsha's perspective, the distinction between the two first interpretations of the pasuk, which are from Rabbi Gamliel's colleagues. Rabbi Gamliel, he compared to Rabbi Gamliel, this is the Rabbi as Rabbi Yeshua. Then Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua both arguing that the reason that the nations are doing tzedakah is because they want to be rewarded for the tzedakah, either rewarded with long life or rewarded with an empire that continues to exist. Whereas Rabbi Gamliel says, the misstep over here is they're doing it so that they can boast. Which means the more kindness they do, the more tzedakah they give, the more they transgress the concepts of arrogance and boasting. As far as the machloikas, again, to understand the distinction between whether the problem is that they're looking for a reward or whether the problem is that they're looking to lift themselves up, goes back to the same key question: what is the primary thing we look at? The matter or the form, the material or the message? Let's explain. How come it is when we speak about the tzedakah and chesed of the non-Jewish world, not only do we say it's not a mitzvah, but we say it's a concept of chatas, again, which could either mean sin or lack, because chatas means lack. The way that they approach tzedakah takes away from the value of tzedakah. And could take it away so badly that it could actually become something negative, a chatas, a sin. In order to understand that, we have to see that there are two perspectives of tzedakah. There's the act of giving. You actually give the poor person what he needs. And then, how you give it to the poor person. As the Gemara tells us that if a person, in addition to giving money to the poor, also gives them words of encouragement, that's even better. Losses with save upon him yofis, and therefore you're supposed to give tzedakah with a happy face. The haris yishtatus b'rega she'ali b'shas ha'mesina. You're supposed to show empathy to a poor person while you're giving them the tzedakah. And that's not a sidebar. It's a core principle of tzedakah. To the extent that the Rambam tells us, any person who gives tzedakah to a poor person with a scowl on their face, after the nosin like elef zehuvim, even if the person gave an absolute fortune, 1,000 gold coins, millions of dollars, because of the attitude, the negative attitude they associated with the tzedakah, they lose the value of what they've given. That's the debate over here between Rabbi Gamliel and the other sages. According to the Chachamim, in this case, Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Yeshua, they argue that the most important thing about tzedakah is the action, the chomer, the giving of tzedakah. You give the person tzedakah. So therefore they say, so what could be wrong about giving tzedakah? You've given tzedakah, that's what counts. The person actually has the money in the bank, you've solved their problem, that's a good thing. What's negative about it? The motivation that I'm doing it in order to get a reward. Because the only driving reason why these people are giving tzedakah is because they will get something in return. To the extent that if they don't get the reward, they actually regret having given the tzedakah because it didn't work. The formula didn't work. That tells us that the action is lacking. Which means they're not giving relative to what the poor person needs, they're giving relative to the reward they believe and imagine they're going to get. In other words, their intention is not to provide for the poor person what he lacks. Their intention is to provide for themselves what they believe they lack. They lack the guarantee of a long life, so they're going to now ensure that they have it. They lack the guarantee of the sustainability of the empire, so now they're going to have it. So what's wrong with what they're doing? They're not focused on what the action is supposed to be about, helping the poor person. They're trying to help themselves. Whereas Rabbi Gamliel says the main thing that we have to focus on is the message, the character of what they're doing. Therefore, when it comes to tzedakah, it's not just about the mechanical action of giving the person money, it's about what you bring to the person emotionally, the support that you give them, the empathy, etc. Therefore, if you're looking at the quality of what you're sharing with them, what could be lacking in the gifts of the non-Jewish world? I'm not so concerned, Rabbi Gamliel says, that they care about their own rewards. Because that's not really the problem over here. Whereas the fact that they're looking to be able to lift themselves, they're looking to be able to prop themselves up, they're looking to be able to boast about it. Let's say where it's all about my greatness. That completely sucks out the value of tzedakah. Because the key thing of tzedakah is the good countenance, the smiling face. To commiserate with the poor person. The only possible way that a person can be empathetic to the poor man is if you don't think that I'm great, I'm on a pedestal. Can't be patronizing. And here the person is doing the exact opposite. Instead of getting down into the world of the ani and sharing with him, this person is lifting themselves up above the ani and saying, "It's about me. I'm a great guy." Following with what we've done consistently through the Sikha, we also have to explain why we need to know that Rabbi Gamliel has a different view to the sages with regards to tzedakah, and we can't just naturally deduce it from what we've learned about Rabbi Gamliel's views on Torah and on davening. Because we shall see in a moment that Rabbi Gamliel's views of tzedakah are different and have another angle that we didn't see from his views on davening and on learning. It's quite obvious when it comes to Torah learning and to davening, we're not so focused on the material, it's more about the spiritual state, right? The information that we're learning, the davening that we're doing. When a person's learning Torah, the primary thing is to understand it. And that the quality of the learning should be such that it motivates a person to act in line with what they have learned. So it's not so much about what you're learning, it's about how you're learning. Eichos versus kamos, tzura versus chaymer. But the same thing with davening. The primary aspect of davening is avodah shebelev, that it's how I feel, where I see myself, that I understand I'm face to face with the Eibishter. But when it comes to tzedakah, your logic might go in the exact opposite direction. It's not so much about intention and focus and spirituality. The purpose of tzedakah, give a person what they need. That he should receive what he needs. For which reason you could argue, who cares what you're thinking? That's not the main thing over here. Guaranteed, the poor person doesn't care so much about what you're thinking as much about the fact that he has money. Like the Sifri tells us, if a person loses a coin, and a poor person found it, and used it to feed himself, it's considered like you gave tzedakah. And you didn't even know about it. So intention is not a big deal in tzedakah. So you'd think, had we only known that Rabbi Gamliel focuses on Eichos and on Surah in the context of davening and of learning, I might have suggested, I could think, okay, but maybe Rabbi Gamliel will agree that in the case of tzedakah, where the whole objective of tzedakah is to be able to facilitate the needs of the poor person, maybe the intention is not so important, the actual cash is what counts. That's why we have to spell out Rabbi Gamliel's view, also in the context of tzedakah, to teach us that we should know that Rabbi Gamliel holds, even in a mitzvah, which is very much about the quantity of what you give. The key is the quality with which you give it. And in reverse. Let's say we only knew that Rabbi Gamliel says in the case of tzedakah that the quality overrides the quantity. I could not deduce from that what he believes in the context of what kind of student you should accept in your yeshiva, or who should be the one to lead the davening, or what's the most important thing in the minyan. Because when it's tzedakah, I've got two choices, and the question is, which takes precedence? Is it about the material, in other words, that you're giving enough to sustain the oni, or the manner in which you're giving, that it's b'sevei panim yafos and with empathy. But one thing's for sure, if a person gets their intentions wrong, it doesn't undermine the giving. So therefore it's okay to focus on intention. Whereas when you're talking about davening, you're talking about learning. It's one or the other. You can't have both. In tzedakah, you could have both. You could have good eichos and you could have good kamas. You could prioritize eichos and it doesn't take away from the kamas. You could prioritize kamas and it's not the end of the world if the eichos is missing. But in the case of the Beis HaMedrash, if you're going to focus on those who have the highest quality students, you'll have fewer students. In the case of davening, that's the fact. If you're going Rabbi Gamliel's route, there are fewer students in the yeshiva. And that's even more so the case in davening. The whole value of the Shliach Tzibur is that he's one. That there are not many tefillas going on. There's one person davening over here. And therefore you wouldn't know that just because Rabbi Gamliel says when it comes to tzedakah, focus on the intention, therefore the same with davening. No, because focusing on the intention in tzedakah is not going to make you give less tzedakah, whereas focusing on the intention in davening will reduce the amount of people davening, and focusing on the quality of the student will reduce the amount of talmidim. And of course you can deduce how the reverse is true for the chachamim. Now we can analyze why it is that Rabbi Gamliel adopts his particular view as opposed to the other chachamim, because of his unique role in the community, which is different from the average chacham. This concept that Rabbi Gamliel teaches, which we have derived first by looking at the value of the Shliach Tzibur, that he believes that quality is so valuable that it can even apply if it means reducing the quantity, is a reflection on Rabbi Gamliel's role in the Jewish world, the Nasi in the community. What does it mean to be the Nasi? The Nasi can only be one. There can only be one Nasi in any generation. Similar to a king. Could have a viceroy, but the definition of a king is there is only one king per generation. The only time you can accommodate more than one king is in more than one kingdom. Like the split between the higher, so the northern and southern kingdoms in Israel. But why is it that there's only one Nasi? Because what makes a person a Nasi or what makes a person a king is that they have a quality that is far superior to everybody else. As we know, that the idea of a Nasi hu hakol, and the idea of a king, is that they are individuals who encapsulate and incorporate within them the entire existence of the entire nation. And therefore, the role, the position of a king and of a Nasi has nothing at all to do with quantity. To the contrary. So Adam Echad Bilvad. It's one person who is the nucleus of the entire Jewish community. The smallest number that you could have. And the value that the king or the Nasi brings to the table is qualitative. That's why this is the individual who can bring everybody into unity, and this is the individual who can lead everybody because of their uniqueness. Therefore, Rabbi Gamliel, whose experience in the Jewish community is a Nasi, he looks at davening and says the person in the context of davening must be like the Nasi in the context of the community. That there's so much attention to pay to quality. Not only is it the most important factor, we are willing to focus on the value of quality, even if it means you diminish the quantity. One Nasi can do everything for the community. One Melech can do everything for the community. One Shliach Tzibur can daven for the community. And that's why there's this ongoing debate between Rabbi Gamliel and the Chachamim. Because they are great people, but they are part of a collaborative. They are part of the Sanhedrin. The value of the Sanhedrin lies in its numbers. In order to have a Sanhedrin, you have to have 71 judges. That's a lot of people. And if one of those judges is missing, it's not a Sanhedrin, even if it is the most junior judge, because what makes a Sanhedrin is numbers, kamos. That is the core of this ongoing series of debates between Rabbi Gamliel and the Chachamim. If, like the Chachamim who live in the world of Kamos, argue that quantity is the key factor, or Rabbi Gamliel who lives in the world of Eichos, that quality is the key factor, as we see highlighted in the debate around davening, where you saw right in the beginning the Chachamim say what makes the davening of a tzibur, the people, the quantity. Similar to their experience in the Sanhedrin, what makes a Sanhedrin? 71 people. Rabbi Gamliel whereas Rabbi Gamliel says the key of davening is the Shliach Tzibur, that one person who is so powerful, who is so elevated, they can bring everybody together. Because the Shliach Tzibur is that pivot, he is that central beam of the entire nation, like the Nasi is. He represents the quality of the entire community together, and therefore has the power, of course, to connect and to elevate them.